News. Greetings, fellow Watford fans. Omar Moore here, and it's time for the Orns 10-minute plus take on Watford nil, Tottenham Hotspur 1. A game to start 2022, the very first day of 2022, with a kick in the teeth for Watford and Watford fans. A performance in the second half that did not deserve the unravelling at the very end of a game that should have been seen out as a 0-0 draw and Watford's first clean sheet of this new Premier League season. Instead, it continues to pile on the agony on a Watford side who've now lost 7 consecutive Premier League games and 8 Premier League games in their last 9, and 13 Premier League losses in their first 18 Premier League games. Now that would be enough to see any manager out the door at the Vic, but because Claudio Ranieri has such a cozy relationship with the board and with the Pozzos, his job continues to be very much at Watford. And I say that because I don't even think that Ranieri is the problem here. I've said it many times, Claudio Ranieri is not the reason why Watford have lost 13 of the first 18 games. Claudio Ranieri has actually come in and given Watford an identity going forward, an identity of purpose when they play well enough. And try to get the defensive ship right. I mean, evidence of that was certainly true today in the second half of this game, where Watford defended a whole lot better than they did the first half against a Tottenham side that really didn't do much with what possession they had, and a Tottenham side that were given full width of the pitch in the first half, all the spaces and all the acreage in Vicarage Road that Tottenham could enjoy at their leisure, and did not do enough with it. And Watford's defending only barely got them out of that first half. Harry Kane, how he did not score in the first half, I will never know. Daniel Backman's distribution of the ball continues to be poor, kicking the ball straight to Lloris, his opposite number, in the Tottenham goal in that first half. And some poor decision making by Backman, but he did make a couple of very good saves in the second half of this game that kept Watford in it at 0-0. And then Watford began to grow into the game after that poor first half in the second half with some resolute defending and some forward play. João Pedro's insertion into the second half right at the start of the half was a big factor for Watford, moving the ball quicker, the tempo much faster, players with positivity. It seemed like the positivity of João Pedro really helped this Watford side in the second half. He went forward, had a magnificent run, halted by a referee that has no idea what he was doing, blowing a whistle there instead of playing an advantage that could have seen João Pedro in with a shout of goal, and certainly later on in this game should have seen João Pedro taking a penalty. At least in that situation, Lloris definitely clips João Pedro in the box. That should have been a penalty. Referee did not want to know about it, and as a result, Watford denied there of an opportunity to perhaps score in a game where perhaps they could have scored had it not been for the ref. But this is not the reason why Watford lost this game. The referee was not the reason why Watford fell to defeat. It was individual defensive mistakes. Once again, this time Uraj Kuchka continuing his poor run. And he did have a decent game overall, but that really does not matter when you do not do what you're supposed to do in these games, see these games out defensively. And people will say, well, maybe Ranieri should have subbed Ngaki, and people will say, well, maybe, Kuchka needed to have a break and be subbed off for someone else, whatever. The substitutions had already been made. I think all 3 of them have been. And there is an argument for why you should have 5 Premier League substitutions, especially during this COVID era that we are all living in and struggling through, because then perhaps that substitution may have been made, or maybe Ranieri didn't have confidence in Ngaki. Maybe there's something about Ngaki that he sees that is not good. I don't know. None of us really knows that. But the point is that whether you're tired or not, whether you are a veteran player as Kuchki is or not, you cannot afford to be making a silly challenge like that on these players for Tottenham. You shouldn't be doing that. It's the same thing with Troost-Ekong at Brentford. It's the same thing that we've seen in games after games after games. The game against Aston Villa that we won, a stupid challenge by Adam Messina in the box on the Villa player Bertrand Traore, and that cost us a needless goal given away there. And the goal was scored from the penalty spot by Danny Ings. That made that game at the start of the season a 3-2 game when it should have been a 3-1 game. And this is the kind of thing that mounts up on a team that is desperately, desperately trying to stay alive in the Premier League and is flirting oh so dangerously with relegation. I think it's very clear now that even the most optimistic Watford fans, such as yours truly, can see clearly what is going on here. And it's not just on the pitch, it is the board. I've said this a million times. The board is got to look at itself. It has to look at itself in the mirror and make some critical moves in January, because this January transfer window is going to be the difference, quite frankly, in my view, between Watford staying in this league and heading back to the league they came from in the Championship. And look, you can bring in all kinds of players here. If they're not going to defend every single minute and every single second and every single blade of grass during a contest in the Premier League, then it's not going to make a difference. This is not about the manager. This is not about the head coach. It is about the players on the pitch making decisions at the ends of games. And it's happened again. I said this before. Brentford in the 95th minute, the challenge by a truce to Kong. The game in the 95th minute at the Vic against Aston Villa on the opening day of the season. Adam Messina doing the same thing. The game today, Uraj Kuchka, a silly free kick giveaway in a very dangerous area in the 96th minute. And that's the minute that Davinson Sanchez pops up and scores the goal, the only goal of the game. It's a cruel kick in the teeth, this one. This one really, really hurts. This one hurts more than the Chelsea game, because at least in the Chelsea game, we really gave a good account of ourselves. And we didn't give a good account of ourselves throughout this particular game. And although the defending was much, much better from Watford in the second half, the problem is that you cannot switch off in this league, whether you're tired or whether you're not. You cannot switch off for a second in that situation. And if you want to bring cover, then cover. I think there was another defender in the area there, and then you make that challenge, and it's just absolutely inexplicable. I think it was Son who was the one that was being challenged there. He was going nowhere. Same thing with the Brentford player a few weeks ago, going nowhere. And Watford players are fouling for fun, and that is a problem. That's about defensive discipline. That's about mentality, but also it is about defensive cohesiveness. You cannot do that within the 96th minute of the game. And this game also had been interrupted for 8 minutes while a fan was suffering from a medical emergency. It's not yet known, as of the time I'm recording this, what that emergency was. Obviously, it was very serious. And also kudos to the medical staffs of both teams who rushed over, and also kudos to those Watford fans who alerted those teams of the danger, of the medical staff members of the danger of what was going on in the stands. And I hope that fan will be okay ultimately. I really do, because I mean this was a really difficult day for Watford, and as I say, I hope that fan is okay. But Watford are not okay as a football club right now. The players on the pitch are not seeing these games out. The only silver lining that I can say is that they have to build upon what they did for the vast majority of the second half defensively. It was clear that Watford today were going to be playing a defensive game. They defended too deep in the first half. As I said earlier, they've given away so much space. They gave away acres and acres of space of their home pitch to Tottenham. And in the second half, they compacted much, much better. Really liked the defensive positioning. Kushka did have a good game, but the point is, it doesn't matter how good a game you have. You cannot, under any circumstances, in any scenario, give away a silly free kick like that. You're a 34-year-old, and it doesn't matter what age. You're a veteran footballer. Let me put it that way. He's a veteran footballer. He's got to do better than that. And no excuses for anybody on this team. No excuses. I am Watford through and through. I'm going to praise these lads when they do a good job, and I'm going to critique them and criticize them when they're not. And the team defending in the second half was so much better than it was in the first. Really was encouraged by that. That is the silver lining you can grab onto, is that they have to build off of the defensive performance in the second half. But the individual defensive mistakes must stop. And Uraj Kuchka has done this again now. He did it against West Ham with that stupid chest back. I don't know why he was chesting the ball back to Bachmann, where if you've got Jared Bowen running around in the penalty box, you can't switch off in this Premier League. And what Kushka should have done the other day is kick that ball into the stands. I said that before. And today, what he should have done is stayed with his man and forced him to the byline and forced him to try to make a play. Do not bring him down. There's no need to bring him down in that situation. They're literally minutes away from getting a 0-0. And he's cost us 3 points today. End of. He's cost us the 3 points. I mean, other than that, Watford's defense was good in the second half. And João Pedro, a lively spark in his appearance in the second half, subbing for Dennis, who was subbed off. João Pedro, as I said earlier, should have had a penalty. Should have had a penalty. And the referee just doesn't know what he's doing in this spot. And you blow a whistle of a guy who's got the advantage. Play the advantage, ref. You can always go back later on. Let the play run out and let it finish. For goodness sake, man. This is the Premier League. You're refereeing like you're refereeing a pub football. This is the Premier League, man. Your refereeing is shambolic. I mean, it's absolutely shambolic. So the referee doesn't get any points for me today. And Tottenham really got this game on a free because they did not do much to deserve this win. But all that was lacking in this whole game was a bit of quality, and up stepped a world-class player to deliver it at our expense. And that was only possible because one Watford player decided to throw away this game with a stupid challenge. We cannot abide by this anymore. But the problems go even deeper than what's on the pitch right now for us. We don't have, I think, a lineup that is good enough to compete consistently in the Premier League. And that is very much the truth here. That is the truth here. You cannot look at 18 games. Watford have now played 18 Premier League games. They are almost at the halfway point of this Premier League season. And you can't say it, you can't look past that fact. The players aren't good enough. That's just what this is. This is not about Claudio Ranieri. Ranieri has won a Premier League title with a team that had no chance. That was what, 500 to 1, 5,000 to 1, 5 years ago, 6 years ago? They were 5,000 to 1 or 500 to 1, Leicester. I think it was 5,000 to 1 to win the Premier League that year. Watford are in real trouble here. And I am deeply concerned that really the two silver liners we have are the defensive performance in the second half that could be built upon for the next Premier League match. And then the other silver lining is this January transfer window. The board has got to do its job and back Ranieri. I just don't think there's any other way around it. You have got to back him. Give the man a chance to stamp his imprimatur on this team with his players. Please. You do not want to do this any other way. Ranieri is the right man for this job. The question is, what is the board going to do? What are they going to do in this January transfer window? That is the key. I think everything, quite frankly, at this point hinges on that. Because I think the defensive display was better in the second half. There have been patches of games throughout the season where Watford have played very well against Chelsea. The second half against Manchester City, they acquitted themselves quite well. They played obviously very well throughout the game against Manchester United. They played very well, especially in the second half against Everton. They played very well, I think, competently throughout much of the game against Arsenal and were undone by a goal that should never have been allowed. And they played decently against Leicester until the defensive mistakes crept in there. This has been a whole scenario, this whole season, of individual defensive errors that have cost us, whether it's Troost-Ekong, whether it is Adam Messina, whether it is Danny Rose, whether it is Uroš Kučka. These are players. Sierralta's done this when he was, before his injury against Wolves, when we lost 2-0 at home there, with the two defensive mistakes he made. This has come down to defensive mistakes, really silly ones. Everybody makes defensive mistakes in the Premier League, but to make silly, needless mistakes in the Premier League is what really will hurt you. And you've lost 13 of your 18 Premier League games. 13 of them. And many of those were down to needless defensive errors. When you don't kick the ball into touch, when you don't clear the ball, when you don't clear your lines, when you don't kick the ball out for a corner, and you try to get too cute, and you try to chest the ball back to your goalkeeper in a high traffic area, in your own box. That is just not on. And that's one of the reasons why this team finds itself with 13 Premier League losses. We've got barely into the first of the year. here in 2022. And Watford have now had 13 Premier League losses on the season. This really is alarming. 13 of the 18 games Watford have played this season in the Premier League have ended in defeat. We have got to get it together, not only on the pitch, but upstairs. The board has to be looked at here, and the board has to make these right decisions for Ranieri. If you're going to back him, then back him. You brought him into Vicarage Road to do a job for you. And what you should do is give him the tools to do that job with. Because the players we've got now, the vast majority of them just are not cutting it for Premier League. And yes, Sissoko has been marvelous this season. Yes, Emmanuel Dennis has been excellent this season. And yes, there are times where there are players who have pulled their weight. But, outside of two or three players, really the rest just haven't come up to it, have they? And, again, this team is weaker than it was last season, weaker than it was when it was last in the Premier League. Recruitment has not been right. The recruitment has got to be right. The technical director has got to look at all of this. You got rid of Filippo Giraldi, and I think it was the right move at the time. But I want to see what Cristiano Girotta is going to do, because we need better recruitment than what we've got now. And we cannot abide by this. If we want to stay in the Premier League, and listen to me, I've said this all along, I think they're finishing mid-table, but we are a long way off from mid-table. As I said before, even the most optimistic fan, and you're looking at him right now, of this football club, has to say that what we are doing now is extremely dangerous, and the board has got to put this right, because Ranieri is not the problem here. And it would be really, I would really hate to know that they made the decision to get rid of him. Even if the truth is Watford have lost 7 consecutive Premier League games, even if the truth is Watford lost 8 of their last 9 Premier League games, and hardly any of that is down to Ranieri. This is about recruitment. This is about the quality or lack thereof on the pitch. This is about defensive mentality and individual defensive errors game after game. And this is about the board and the choices it's making or not making. The choices that it made in the off-season, in the summer transfer window, not to really look at their defense and do something about it and upgrade it in any way or shape or form. And now, the things they failed to do in the summer of 2021 could come back to haunt them at the end of May if they don't do something in this January window to rectify the lack of action that they took for the defensive situations in this club, because it has really been shambolic now. Again, another silly, needless defensive error has cost us points. And look, this is all on the board right now. I don't know what anybody else has to say about it, but this is very clearly, to me, a board problem with players that are not up to it at the minute, not fit for purpose, quite frankly. I love this club and I love these players, but these are not the players, all of them. I mean, there are obviously some really good players who should be here, like Sissoko, who's been absolutely marvelous, like Emmanuel Dennis, who is Watford's instant new hero on the block here, and maybe one or two others. But listen, this is just not good enough. It's not good enough, and it's going to hurt us if we don't start addressing this. So for me, the board is the biggest issue really here in this game today, as is one player who, again, with a really silly, needless challenge that didn't have to be made. You have to see these games out. I don't care how tired you are a professional footballer, and in Kushka's case, you are a veteran footballer. See the game out. It's that simple. This is the Premier League. It is not pub football, but Watford are making it awfully difficult to tell the difference between the two when the way they play in these games, especially toward the end of the game. And it's a shame to say it, but it is a fact. And we've got to be honest that the board is culpable here. The board is culpable here. And we are now in 2022 with an unhappy new year so far. And there's only one day in so far of the year. And we started on this unhappy, very unhappy kick in the teeth moment with this horrible result today that I think is one of the most outward betrayals of the season by one player in one game. Of all the times we've seen these mistakes happen, these mistakes happen over and over. You would think that we would learn from these mistakes that we've made in these games that have cost us. You would have thought that we had, but no, we've not learned anything. And, that's what really concerns me. here. And Tottenham run away from this game. They go back to North London with 3 points that I don't think they deserved. I mean, I really don't think they deserved the points. But again, Tottenham, you give a good Premier League team like Tottenham a chance. Sooner or later, they're going to take it. And quite frankly, it was our defense, it was our player who cost us today. Uraj Kushka cost us this game, cost us a point. We get a point today. We start 2022 with a very good and promising base to build off of. But I say again, the silver lining to take out of this game is Watford's team defensive performance was very good in that second half, outside of that one critical mistake that cost us. And for me, it's the board's move next on the chessboard, what the board will do. And hopefully they will move the right pieces in here come this January transfer window. And really, there's not much else to say about this game today. It's an astonishing result that is really poor for us. And I think if the Watford bring the same defensive intensity in the second half of this game and maintain it without the silly defensive mistake that cost us the game, I think we can start to move upward and forwards in a positive way. But if we continue to have individual players, betray us and stab us in the back with these very poor decision-making errors and these poor decisions, again, we are not going to be long for this league. And I hope I'm wrong. And I think I'm going to be wrong. I think Watford are going to stay up. Ultimately, I still think they're going to be making a move north toward that mid-table area. But right now, my God, we are so far away from it. And again, today, we saw again how individual mistakes cost you in these games. You cannot switch off in the Premier League. If you do, you pay the price that you pay today. And this one was an awful end to a game that really should not have been lost. It should have been our first clean sheet of the season. But as it stands, still, we are so far away from a clean sheet yet again. We got to the 96th minute of the game with a clean sheet, but that was not even enough for us. And it now continues to go on. 18 games in this Premier League season and no clean sheets. And Watford now are well under the cosh here. And we now have to see what this board is going to do in this January transfer window. I hope that defense is the first priority. And I hope that Claudio Ranieri is backed properly during this transfer window, because it's nothing more than he deserves. I mean, he really, really should be getting backing from this board. And let's see if they do just that. This has been the Orns post-match 10-minute take on Watford 0, Tottenham Hotspur 1.